The flickering fluorescent lights of the precinct buzzed a monotonous tune as Officer Brady signed out for his shift. Another Friday night in the books, or rather, about to be. Brady was a creature of habit, a necessity forged in the crucible of a decade on the force. He favored the late shift, less paperwork, more action. Usually of the petty crime variety in the district he patrolled, he was a good cop. Fundamentally, the cynicism that clung to him like cheap cologne was a defense mechanism, a shield against the constant barrage of human misery he witnessed daily. He'd seen too much, buried too many dreams under the weight of poverty and desperation. The divorce hadn't helped either. Sarah had said he was too consumed by the job, that he brought the darkness home with him. Maybe she was right. Tonight, his patrol took him through the usual haunts, the dimly lit streets bordering the industrial park, the perpetually struggling businesses on Elm Street, the rows of dilapidated houses where hope seemed to have long since packed its bags. The low-income neighborhood was a familiar landscape, etched into his memory like the lines on his weathered face. He drove slowly, the cruiser's headlights cutting through the inky blackness. The radio crackled with the usual static and occasional dispatch calls, a domestic dispute, a suspected break-in. The mundane symphony of urban decay that he responded to a call about a busted tail light. But that was it. Brady found himself thinking about his mother. Her health had been failing for months, the doctors painting an increasingly bleak picture. He tried to visit her as often as he could, but the guilt gnawed at him. Was he doing enough? Could he be doing more? The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, a constant ache in his chest. He passed another boarded-up storefront, the graffiti a testament to the neighborhood's silent scream. Brady sighed. Adjusting the rearview mirror, he needed a win. Something to break the monotony, something to remind him why he put on the uniform every day. He just didn't expect it to come in the form of a child. The bus stop was a lonely island in a sea of shadows. The streetlight above flickered erratically, casting an unsettling strobe effect on the deserted street. Brady almost missed him. The boy was slumped against the faded plastic of the bus stop bench, his small frame swallowed by the darkness. It was the glint of something metallic that caught Brady's eye, the buckle of the duffel bag clutched tightly in the boy's hand. Brady pulled the cruiser to the curb, the sudden screech of tires momentarily shattering the silence. He killed the engine and stepped out, the chill night air biting at his exposed skin. As he approached, he could see the boy was young, no older than 12, maybe even younger. His clothes were ragged and ill-fitting, stained with dirt and grimed. A thin, worn jacket offered little protection against the cold. "Hey, kid," Brady said, his voice soft but firm. "You all right?" The boy didn't respond. Brady knelt down, his hand hovering near the boy's shoulder. He hesitated for a moment, then gently shook him. The boy remained unresponsive, his head lolling to the side. Brady's cop instincts kicked into high gear. This wasn't just a kid who had missed the last bus. Something was wrong. That he noticed the boy's face was pale, almost translucent in the flickering light. His lips were slightly blue, and his breathing was shallow and raspy. That he was definitely unconscious. The duffel bag was almost pathetically large for the boy, its canvas worn and faded, a testament to countless journeys. It looked heavy, like it was filled with rocks, or something far more valuable. That a wave of protectiveness washed over Brady. He saw his own troubled childhood reflected in the boy's vulnerable form. He remembered the nights he spent wandering the streets, lost and alone. That he couldn't let this kid become another statistic. That he had to help him. The radio crackled again, a reminder of the world outside. But for now, Brady's focus was solely on the boy. That he reached for his radio, his fingers already dialing 911. "Dispatch, this is Officer Brady. I need an ambulance at the bus stop on Elm and Oak. I've got an unconscious male, juvenile, possible hypothermia, and unknown medical condition." Brady, kneeling beside the boy, carefully felt for a pulse. It was weak and thready, barely a flicker beneath his fingertips. He pressed 2 fingers to the boy's neck, finding a slightly stronger, but still concerning, rhythm. The ambulance was on its way, but every second counted. He needed to get a better sense of the boy's condition. He gently unbuttoned the boy's thin jacket, revealing a threadbare t-shirt beneath. The boy's ribs were visible beneath his skin, a stark reminder of the malnutrition that plagued this part of town. Brady had seen it before, but it never got easier. He ran his hands carefully over the boy's arms and legs, Checking for any obvious fractures or wounds, he found nothing new. But what he did find sent a shiver down his spine. On the boy's wrists, hidden beneath the sleeves of his t-shirt, were a series of faded, almost translucent scars. They were old, clearly self-inflicted, but their presence spoke volumes about the boy's past. A history of pain and desperation etched onto his skin. Brady felt a pang of empathy, a shared understanding of the darkness that could drive someone to such an act. He continued his assessment, checking the boy's pupils. They were dilated and unresponsive to light, another worrying sign that he gently tilted the boy's head back, checking his airway. It was clear, but the boy's breathing remained shallow and labored. He needed professional medical attention, and he needed it now. The sound of sirens pierced the night air, growing louder with each passing second. Brady breathed a sigh of relief. Help was on its way. He continued to monitor the boy's vital signs, his gaze sweeping over the boy's face, searching for any clues to his identity, any indication of what had led him to this desolate bus stop. The duffel bag remained clutched tightly in the boy's hand, a silent mystery waiting to be unraveled. The ambulance finally screeched to a halt, its flashing lights painting the scene in a surreal, almost dreamlike glow. Paramedics rushed towards them, their faces grim with concern. Brady stood back, allowing them to take over, but his eyes remained fixed on the boy, his mind already racing, trying to piece together the puzzle of his life. The paramedics efficiently worked to stabilize the boy, hooking him up to an oxygen mask, and IV. They prepared to load him onto the stretcher. Brady found his gaze drawn back to the duffel bag. It lay on the ground, a silent, enigmatic presence. It was surprisingly heavy for its size. The canvas strained and bulging, but he knew he shouldn't. Protocol dictated that he secure the bag and wait for detectives. Evidence could be compromised, but the boy's face, the scars, the sheer vulnerability of his unconscious form, tugged at Brady. He needed to know who this kid was. Maybe there was identification inside, a name, an address, a clue to his past. Maybe there was medication, something that could explain his collapse. He glanced at the paramedics, their focus entirely on the boy. He could do this quickly, discreetly. Just a peek. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the zipper. He knew he was crossing a line, bending the rules. But sometimes, rules were meant to be bent, especially when a child's life hung in the balance. The weight of the bag also bothered him. What would a kid be carrying? Rocks? Unlikely. That much weight would suggest something more deliberate, something valuable. His cop instincts screamed at him. This wasn't just a runaway kid with a few belongings. This was something else. He took a deep breath, the cold air stinging his lungs. He made his decision. He knelt down, his fingers trembling slightly, and reached for the zipper. The metal teeth snagged for a moment. Resisting his touch, he tugged harder, and the zipper finally gave way with a rasping sound that seemed deafening in the night. He glanced around nervously, ensuring no one was watching. The paramedics were still preoccupied with the boy. Brady pulled the zipper open just enough to peek inside. The faint light from the streetlight illuminated a portion of the bag's contents. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. This wasn't identification. This wasn't medication. This was something far more unexpected, far more disturbing. The air suddenly felt thick and heavy, charged with an unspoken threat. Brady widened the opening of the duffel bag, his heart pounding in his chest. The faint streetlight illuminated the contents, revealing neatly stacked bundles of cash, crisp, new bills, bound together with thick rubber bands. 20s, 50s, and even the occasional 100. It was a small fortune. Far more money than Brady had ever seen in a duffel bag, let alone one carried by a malnourished child. His initial reaction was disbelief. He blinked, thinking his eyes were playing tricks on him. But the stacks of cash remained, a tangible reality in the dimly lit night. Disbelief quickly morphed into suspicion. Where did this money come from? What was a kid doing with this much cash? The possibilities raced through his mind, each more disturbing than the last. Drug, money, extortion, the proceeds of some kind of elaborate theft? None of it made sense. The boy didn't look like a hardened criminal. He looked like a victim. But the money told a different story. It spoke of something dark and dangerous, something far beyond the boy's apparent age and vulnerability. He reached into the bag, carefully lifting one of the bundles. The bills felt crisp and new beneath his fingers that he flipped through them quickly, confirming his initial assessment that it was real money, not counterfeit. He replaced the bundle and zipped the bag closed, his mind reeling that he needed to call it in, report his findings. But something held him back. The paramedics were still loading the boy into the ambulance, their faces etched with concern that he knew that once he called it in, the case would be out of his hands. Detectives would swarm the scene, the boy would be taken into protective custody, and the investigation would begin. He wouldn't be able to follow up, to find out what had happened to the boy, to unravel the mystery of the duffel bag. He looked at the ambulance doors closing, the flashing lights reflecting in his eyes. He knew he was playing a dangerous game, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than met the eye. The money was just the beginning. He needed to dig deeper, to find out who this boy was and what he was running from. He knew he was risking his career, his reputation, everything he had worked for, but he couldn't walk away. Not yet. The ambulance sped away, its siren fading into the distance. Brady stood alone on the deserted street, the duffel bag heavy in his hand. He knew he couldn't delay any longer. He had to find out what was really going on. With renewed resolve, he unzipped the bag completely, revealing the full extent of its contents. The stacks of cash filled the upper portion, a wall of green blocking his view. He reached inside, carefully removing the bundles one by one. As he cleared the money, he noticed something hidden beneath, a folded piece of paper and a small photograph. He picked them up, his hands trembling slightly. The paper was a handwritten note, scrawled in messy, uneven lettering. He unfolded it and began to read. The words jumped out at him, cold and menacing. It was a detailed plan, outlining a kidnapping and a ransom demand. The note described the victim, her routines, and the drop-off location for the money. A wave of nausea washed over him. This wasn't just some petty crime. This was something far more serious, far more sinister. He glanced at the photograph. It was a picture of a young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with bright, smiling eyes and long, flowing hair. He recognized her instantly. It was Emily Carter, the daughter of local businessman and philanthropist Richard Carter. The Carters were pillars of the community, known for their generosity and their unwavering support of local charities. The blood drained from Brady's face. He felt a chill run down his spine, a sense of dread that settled deep in his bones. This wasn't just a case anymore. This was personal. He knew the Carters, had met them at several community events. He couldn't imagine the pain and anguish they must be going through. He went pale, his face ashen in the dim light. The weight of the situation crashed down on him, a crushing burden of responsibility. He knew he had to act, and he had to act fast. Emily Carter's life was in danger, and he was the only one who knew it. He glanced at his watch. Time was slipping away. He had a choice to make, a decision that could determine the fate of a young girl. He took a deep breath, steeling his resolve that he wouldn't let Emily Carter become another victim, that he wouldn't let the kidnappers get away with this. He would do everything in his power to bring her home safe. Brady stared at the photograph of Emily Carter, her smiling face a stark contrast to the grim reality of her situation. That he knew what he should do. He should call it in, report everything to dispatch, and wait for the detectives to arrive. He should follow protocol, secure the scene, and let the professionals handle it. That was the safe thing to do, the responsible thing to do. But he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The note mentioned a deadline, a specific time for the ransom drop. If he waited for the detectives, precious hours would be lost. Hours that could mean the difference between life and death for Emily Carter. He wrestled with the decision, his mind a battleground between duty and instinct. On one hand, he had a responsibility to follow the rules, to trust the system. On the other hand, he had a moral obligation to protect innocent lives, to do everything in his power to save Emily Carter. He thought of his mother, her frail body weakening with each passing day. He thought of Sarah, his ex-wife, her words echoing in his ears. "You care more about the job than you do about me." He thought of the boy in the ambulance, his future uncertain, his past shrouded in mystery. All these faces, all these stories, weighed heavily on his conscience. He knew that if he waited, he might never forgive himself. He couldn't stand idly by while a young girl's life hung in the balance. He had to act, even if it meant risking everything. He had to trust his gut, his instincts, his years of experience on the force. The decision was made. He wouldn't wait. He would take immediate action. Using the information in the bag to track down the kidnappers and rescue Emily Carter, he knew he was walking a dangerous line, potentially jeopardizing the investigation and his own career. But he couldn't let fear paralyze him. That he had to be brave, to be decisive, to be the hero that Emily Carter needed. He grabbed his radio, his finger hovering over the transmit button. He took a deep breath, preparing to break protocol and embark on a rogue mission. But then he paused, a flicker of doubt crossing his mind. Was he making the right decision? Was he letting his emotions cloud his judgment? He closed his eyes, picturing Emily Carter's face again. The doubt vanished, replaced by a steely determination. He would do whatever it took to bring her home safe. Brady keyed the microphone on his radio, his voice tight with urgency. "Dispatch, this is Officer Brady. Unit 42, I have a possible kidnapping in progress. Victim is Emily Carter, daughter of Richard Carter. I repeat, kidnapping in progress." He paused, waiting for the dispatcher to acknowledge. "Unit 42, this is dispatch. Say again." The dispatcher responded, her voice laced with concern. Brady quickly relayed the details. Omitting the fact that he had opened the duffel bag without authorization, he simply stated that he had received credible information about a planned kidnapping and was proceeding to investigate. He provided a brief description of the note and the photograph, urging dispatch to alert the detectives and the Carter family immediately. "Dispatch, I am proceeding to the location mentioned in the note. Request backup, but advise detectives to meet me there. Time is of the essence." He ended the transmission, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He knew he had to move fast. Every second counted. He jumped back into his cruiser, his tires squealing as he pulled away from the curb. He activated the siren and the emergency lights. Weaving through the late-night traffic, his mind focused on the task at hand. The note was his only lead, a fragile thread in a complex web of deceit. The IT mentioned a specific location, a dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of town. Brady knew the area well. It was a desolate industrial zone, filled with abandoned buildings and forgotten dreams. The perfect place for a kidnapping. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. He knew he was taking a huge risk, going into the warehouse alone. He had no idea what he would find there, how many kidnappers he would face, or what kind of weapons they might possess. But he couldn't let fear paralyze him. He had to push forward, to trust his instincts, to believe that he could save Emily Carter. As he raced towards the warehouse, he replayed the events of the night in his mind. The unconscious boy, the duffel bag filled with cash, the chilling note, the photograph of Emily Carter. It all felt surreal, like something out of a movie. But this was real, and a young girl's life depended on him. He pressed his foot down on the accelerator, his determination growing with each passing mile. He was running out of time. The warehouse loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the inky sky. It was located at the very edge of the industrial zone, far from any other buildings, a place where secrets could easily be buried. As Brady got closer, he slowed the cruiser, turning off the siren and dimming the headlights. He wanted to approach undetected. The warehouse was even more dilapidated than he had imagined. The brick facade was crumbling, the windows were boarded up, and the roof sagged precariously. Years of neglect had taken their toll, transforming it into a haunting relic of a bygone era. The only sound was the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls, a mournful symphony of decay. Brady parked the cruiser a block away, cutting the engine and killing the lights. He stepped out, drawing his weapon and taking a deep breath. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay, a suffocating reminder of the darkness that lurked within the warehouse walls. He approached cautiously, his senses on high alert. Every shadow seemed to move, every creak of the building sent a shiver down his spine. He circled the perimeter, searching for a way in. The main entrance was sealed shut, but he noticed a broken window at the back of the building, partially covered with a tattered piece of plywood. He peered inside, his eyes struggling to adjust to the darkness. The interior was a cavernous space, filled with shadows and debris. He could make out the faint outlines of rusted machinery and stacks of forgotten crates. The air was still and heavy, pregnant with a sense of foreboding. He knew this was it. This was where Emily Carter was being held. He took another deep breath, steeling his nerves. He had to go in. He couldn't wait for backup. Emily Carter's life depended on him. He carefully removed the plywood from the window, creating an opening just large enough to squeeze through. He hesitated for a moment, his hand resting on the handle of his weapon. He knew he was walking into the unknown, facing an uncertain danger. But he had come too far to turn back now that he squeezed through the window, dropping silently onto the dusty floor inside the warehouse. The darkness enveloped him, and he knew, with a chilling certainty, that he was not alone. Brady moved slowly, his footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust on the floor. He kept his weapon raised, his finger on the trigger, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The warehouse was eerily silent. The only sound his own breathing. He navigated through the maze of crates and machinery, his senses on high alert. He noticed several discarded food wrappers and empty water bottles, evidence that someone had been living here, at least temporarily. He also found a makeshift bed, constructed from old blankets and cardboard boxes. That he continued his search, his heart pounding in his chest. He found no sign of Emily Carter, but he did find more evidence of the kidnapping plot. A map of the surrounding area, marked with a specific location, a secluded cabin in the woods. A roll of duct tape, similar to the kind used in the movies to silence hostages, and a small, child-sized backpack, lying abandoned in a corner. He felt a surge of anger, a burning desire to bring the kidnappers to justice. He knew he was getting closer, but he also knew he was walking into a trap. He had to be careful. Suddenly, a voice shattered the silence. Well, look what we have here." Brady whirled around, his weapon raised. A figure emerged from the shadows, a man with a hardened face and a menacing grin. He was holding a gun, pointed directly at Brady. "You shouldn't be here, officer," the man said, his voice cold and steely. "This doesn't concern you." "Let the girl go," Brady replied, his voice firm but controlled. "This doesn't have to end badly." "It's already ended badly for you," the man sneered. "You're trespassing on private property. I suggest you leave before things get unpleasant." Brady stood his ground, his eyes locked on the man's. He knew he was outgunned, outmanned, and outmaneuvered, but he couldn't back down. He had to protect Emily Carter, even if it meant risking his own life. The tense standoff ensued, the silence broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing. The air crackled with anticipation, the threat of violence hanging heavy in the air. Brady knew that the next move could be his last. Intercut with the warehouse standoff. Flashback. The boy, whose name was Miguel, huddled in the corner of the dilapidated warehouse, shivering in the cold. He was younger then, maybe 9 or 10, his eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. The men who had taken him were cruel and ruthless, demanding obedience and offering only scraps of food and a threadbare blanket in return. They had found him on the streets, alone and vulnerable, and had offered him a place to stay, a warm meal. But the offer had come with a price. They forced him to work for them, running errands, cleaning their hideout, and doing whatever they demanded. One day, they gave him a duffel bag filled with cash and a handwritten note. They told him to deliver it to a specific location, to leave it at a designated spot, and walk away. He didn't know what was in the note, but he suspected it was something bad. As he walked, the weight of the bag grew heavier with each step. That he felt a growing sense of unease, a feeling that he was being used, that he was a pawn in a dangerous game. He started to read the note. The realization of what he was part of washed over him. He knew he couldn't do it. He couldn't be a part of something that would hurt someone else. He had to escape. He had to warn someone. That he had to do something to stop them. He changed direction, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew they would be angry, that they would punish him if they found him. But he didn't care. That he couldn't live with himself if he delivered the note. He ran as fast as his legs would carry him, his lungs burning, his muscles aching. He stumbled and fell, scraping his knees and elbows. But he kept running. He ran until he could run no more, until his body gave out, and he collapsed on the cold pavement, the duffel bag clutched tightly in his hand. Asterisk and flashback asterisk. Back to the warehouse standoff. Brady stared at the kidnapper, his mind racing. He knew that time was running out, that he had to make a move. But he also knew that he couldn't afford to make a mistake. The boy, Miguel, his escape, and the fact he didn't deliver the money was now very important. The standoff stretched on, each man waiting for the other to make the first move. Brady knew he couldn't hesitate any longer. He had to act. And he had to act now. He feigned a cough, a subtle distraction, and then lunged forward, his weapon raised. The kidnapper was caught off guard, his eyes widening in surprise. Brady tackled him to the ground, the two men wrestling for control of the gun. A fierce struggle ensued, the air filled with grunts and groans. Brady, despite his age and weariness, fought with a ferocity born of desperation. He had to win. He had to save Emily Carter. After what seemed like an eternity, Brady managed to disarm the kidnapper, knocking the gun from his hand. That he pinned the man to the ground, his knee pressing against his chest, his weapon pointed at his head. "Where is she?" Brady demanded, his voice hoarse with exertion. "Where's Emily Carter?" The kidnapper, his face contorted with pain and anger, refused to answer. Brady pressed harder, his eyes narrowing. "Tell me, or I swear, you'll regret it." Finally, the kidnapper relented, his resistance broken. "She's not here," he gasped, his voice barely a whisper. "We moved her to the cabin." "The cabin?" Brady asked, his mind racing. "The one on the map." The kidnapper nodded, his eyes filled with fear. "Yes, they took her there hours ago. The boss, he said it was too risky to keep her here." Brady felt a surge of relief, but also a renewed sense of urgency. He had found the kidnapper, but he was no closer to rescuing Emily Carter. He needed to get to the cabin, and he needed to get there fast. He quickly handcuffed the kidnapper, securing him to a nearby pipe. He then retrieved his radio. Calling in the new location to dispatch, he requested immediate backup at the warehouse and a full assault team at the cabin. That he knew he was still running out of time. The cabin was located deep in the woods, far from any paved roads. That it would take the backup team hours to arrive. He couldn't wait. He had to go alone. That he grabbed the map from the table, his heart pounding in his chest. He was one step closer to rescuing Emily Carter. The drive to the cabin was treacherous, the narrow dirt road winding through the dense forest. Brady's cruiser bounced and swayed, the headlights cutting through the darkness like twin swords. Every bump and jolt was a reminder of the precious time he was losing. Finally, he reached the clearing where the cabin stood, a small, dilapidated structure bathed in the pale glow of the moon. That he parked the cruiser a safe distance away. Killing the engine and cutting the lights, he approached on foot, his weapon drawn, his senses on high alert. The cabin was silent, but Brady could feel the tension in the air. He knew he was walking into a trap, but he had no choice. He had to save Emily Carter. That he crept up to the cabin, peering through a crack in the wooden wall. That he could see inside, the interior illuminated by a single flickering lantern. He saw a man pacing back and forth, his face etched with anxiety. That it was the main kidnapper, the boss. And then he saw her, Emily Carter, tied to a chair, her eyes wide with fear. She was unharmed, but her face was pale and tear-streaked. Brady felt a surge of anger, a burning desire to protect her. He kicked down the door, the sudden noise shattering the silence. The kidnapper whirled around, his eyes widening in surprise. He reached for a gun that was lying on a nearby table, but Brady was too fast. He fired his weapon, the bullet striking the kidnapper in the chest. The man staggered backward, his hand clutching his wound, his face contorted with pain. "Let her go," Brady shouted, his voice filled with rage. "It's over." The kidnapper, despite his injury, refused to surrender. He grabbed the gun from the table and pointed it at Brady. The tense standoff ensued, the two men locked in a deadly gaze. "You shouldn't have come here, officer," the kidnapper snarled, his voice filled with hatred. "This was business. You made it personal." "It was always personal," Brady replied, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Now let her go." The kidnapper hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting between Brady and Emily Carter. He knew he was defeated, that there was no way out. With a sigh of resignation, he lowered his weapon. Brady rushed forward, quickly untying Emily Carter from the chair. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, reassuring her that she was safe. The final showdown was over. The sound of sirens filled the night as backup finally arrived at the cabin. Brady stood outside, holding Emily Carter close, reassuring her that everything was going to be all right. The paramedics rushed to attend to the wounded kidnapper, while the detectives began to secure the scene and gather evidence. Emily Carter was reunited with her parents, a tearful reunion filled with relief and gratitude. Richard and Susan Carter thanked Brady profusely, their voices choked with emotion. They knew that he had saved their daughter's life, that he had risked everything to bring her home safe. The kidnapper was taken into custody, charged with kidnapping, extortion, and attempted murder. The investigation was ongoing, but the police were confident that they had apprehended all of the key players in the plot. As for Miguel, he recovered in the hospital, slowly regaining his strength and his health. He was hailed as a hero by the media, his story of courage and redemption captivating the nation. He had risked his own life to do what was right, to prevent the kidnapping from happening. Brady's actions, however, were initially met with scrutiny. His superiors questioned his decision to disregard protocol, to open the duffel bag without authorization, and to enter the warehouse and the cabin alone. He had put himself and Emily Carter in unnecessary danger, they argued. But as the full story emerged, as the detectives pieced together the evidence and uncovered the truth, Brady's actions were ultimately vindicated. He had acted decisively, courageously, and selflessly, saving Emily Carter's life and bringing the kidnappers to justice. The city hailed him as a hero, awarding him a Medal of Valor and a commendation for his bravery. He was featured on the local news, his story inspiring countless others that he had become a symbol of hope and justice, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are still good people willing to do what is right. Weeks later, the dust had settled, the media frenzy had subsided, and life had returned to a semblance of normalcy. But for Brady, things were different. The case had changed him, shaken him out of his jaded complacency. He found himself reflecting on the events of that night, on the choices he had made, and on the impact they had had on his life. He realized that he had been living in a fog, consumed by his personal struggles, his divorce, his mother's illness. He had allowed the darkness to consume him, to cloud his judgment, and to diminish his sense of purpose. But the kidnapping case had forced him to confront his demons, to rediscover the hero within himself. That he had risked everything to save Emily Carter, not because it was his job, but because it was the right thing to do. He had acted with courage, compassion, and selflessness. Reminding himself of the reasons he had become a police officer in the first place, he visited his mother more often, finding solace in her gentle smile and her unwavering love. He even reached out to Sarah, his ex-wife, hoping to mend fences and to rebuild their relationship. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to try. And then there was Miguel. Brady visited him in the hospital, spending hours talking to him, listening to his story, and offering him words of encouragement. He saw in Miguel a reflection of his younger self, a lost and vulnerable soul searching for a sense of belonging. That he decided to become Miguel's mentor, to offer him a chance at a better life. He helped him find a safe and stable foster home, enrolled him in school, and provided him with the guidance and support he needed to thrive. He wanted to show Miguel that there was still hope in the world, that he could overcome his past and build a brighter future. As he looked at Miguel, Brady realized that he had found a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just a jaded cop going through the motions. He was a protector, a guardian, a mentor. He was making a difference in the world, one life at a time. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope amidst his personal struggles. The darkness had not consumed him. That he had found the light.